Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this fireside chat on developer tooling for capital-efficient DeFi protocols. Today, I have with me Bogdan Habic, co-founder and CTO of Tenderly, and myself, I'm Bianca Buza, head of DevRel at Chronicle, the team behind the first Oracle on Ethereum. Maybe before we jump straight into the topic, maybe you can give us a bit of information about your background and also how you started building Tenderly.
Sure. So, wow, this is loud. Okay. Hi, everyone. Bogdan, one of the co-founders and CTO at Tenderly. Tenderly is a full-stack infrastructure platform for dApps and teams, and it sounds like a Wikipedia definition that doesn't sound anything to anyone. So what this Tenderly actually is, it's like 4 different product suites going from developer tooling, which we're going to talk about now, all the way through observability, simulations and some security aspects as well. And we basically started Tenderly on hackathons initially. That's where the name comes from. So we're trying to do public procurement also in Serbian called tender on chain, and the name came from like Tenderly. But we started working on internal tooling, realized we don't particularly care about public procurement, and then pivoted to developer tooling. So this is how the company started, how we started working on this.
Nice, thank you for sharing a bit about that. Maybe to go into the topic of this fireside chat, how would you define capital efficiency in the context of DeFi protocols, and why would you say it has become such a key design priority?
Sure. I'm going to start with a non-answer and actually a joke. Everyone on my father's side is in the music industry, are musicians. And there's this joke that really nails it in every like family dinner where they say that the drummers are the best friends of musicians. So there's like this joke that people like. So the point of the joke, and I know when you need to explain a joke, it doesn't make any sense, but it's the drummers aren't musicians, correct? And it's not a funny joke. Just like how I don't have a sense of humor. No, going deeply into this and continuing with this analogy, Tenderly and me as someone who talks with a lot of our users, I'm not a DeFi protocol builder, but I am their friend. I'm one of their best friends. And we talked about all these companies, so also some stuff that I say might not actually be true and might be dumb because I'm not building a capital efficient DeFi protocol. So that's like a PSA and some dry humor. To answer your question concretely now, so capital efficiency is basically for DeFi protocols is the way that they like to explain it is how can they use the TVL. Now, what does that actually mean? It's basically which financial instruments or which types of tools in the financial sense you give on top of the TVL. It can be something easier like borrowing and lending. That can be like how does that behave. It can be capital efficiency, how much gas you need to spend for a particular thing. That also falls under capital efficiency in the broadest terms. It can also be flash loans and other interesting stuff. So flash loans is a type of capital efficiency. How do you deploy that capital? How do you use it? Although in that case, in a single transaction. So the way as someone, if it's a DeFi protocol's best friend, the way that I define capital efficiency is, again, how to use the TVL of the protocol and what can you do with it and how cheap it is or profitable for you to interact with that particular protocol. I would like to hear yours if you have a different one.
No, I agree. I want to follow up. I love that you mentioned that you talk quite often with builders. I think that's super important, especially when creating tooling for them. So I'm sure you also hear some of their pain points. So what would you say you hear most often in terms of pain points when building for capital efficiency?
I think these problems are extremely hard to solve for. I mean, for example, the previous presentation, I literally didn't understand like 90% of the stuff because my brain doesn't work in curves. I'm not joking. I always tell the truth. So basically, I think there's 2 main pain points that you can say for people building these capitally efficient protocols. One is the mathematical model, the game theoretical aspect of it. So how will the money behave once you deploy it into this market, once you deploy it into this protocol? And this is all the math stuff that is way above my pay grade that I'm not going to fool anyone that they fully understand. But all the pain points that come from that. The other one is actually once you have these models, how do you build protocols that are the personification or like the physical embodiment or like the on-chain embodiment of these mathematical models. This is where Tenderly comes in. So it's basically the pain points that people have is how do I write secure code? That's one thing. How do I write code that I know what it does? And the third one, how do I make it efficient in the sense of gas or what's actually happening within a single transaction? So I see those two broad categories of pain points.
Since you mentioned that you're building the tooling to alleviate some of those pain points, I'm wondering maybe you have any stories you could share about moments when Tenderly tooling has preventing some mistakes, for example, for developers. I'm sure, for example, the transaction simulator probably saved a lot of funds over the time, so maybe some sort of stories in that direction.
I can share two. So Chronicle, if I'm not mistaken, spun out from Maker, if I'm correct. Yeah. So interesting Maker story. It's not a story where we prevented something. It's a story where we notified about that something happened. There was the Six Sigma liquidation that happened years ago. It was a huge liquidation event that happened on chain. We are used by Maker for monitoring, or we were at least used it back then. And we were the fastest to notify them that it happened. Now the problem is that that particular thing happened and it couldn't be reversed. So there was this whole Maker auction that was happening as well to try to save the protocol, and it was successful. So that's a situation where we help someone reason about the thing that happened, but we didn't help them prevent. The second one that I want to share is for simulation. So for those that don't know, who here used the Safe UI to sign something in their life? Yeah. Yay, thank you. Basically, the simulate button that you see there is Tenderly telling you, first of all, will the transaction succeed? But then if you open up the details, it will actually tell you what will a transaction do. And now we actually have a new product as well called Transaction Intelligence, which not only tells you what will happen, but tells you if you actually want the thing to happen. The main integration that I'm shilling for that right now is the Ledger integration. So if you have a Ledger device with a touchscreen and you try to send a transaction, we are actually one of the providers that scans that particular transaction. It shows you a QR code where we tell you, hey, don't send this. You will get rugged. You lose all your funds. And you can like scan the QR code and see what will happen. So there we're preventing stuff from happening on, you can technically say, three sides. So the first one is for the Ledger integration, or in the family wallet, it's preventing retail users from screwing up stuff. That's one, or shooting themselves in the foot usually. The second one is in the Safe UI, it's usually DAOs and protocols that are deploying protocol level changes, trying to prevent these things. A way that we did prevent multiple of those with simulations is in these, I unfortunately cannot name, but capitally efficient DeFi protocols, a couple of them where they wanted to change the parameters of the protocol itself, which would lead to liquidations once those parameters would be updated. So that's the second front. And then the third front is, it's also a simulation product if you squint hard enough, the virtual testnets, which is while people are developing these, you can basically have a safe environment where they can play around with these models and deploy them on chain and see how they behave.
Maybe a follow-up question to that. Could you share maybe some examples where better tooling led to meaningful improvements in terms of efficiency and maybe even protocol resilience? This what you what you share touches a bit on protocol resilience, but maybe on efficiency.
I think for protocol resilience, one of the best tools that did anything ever for anything is flash loans. I don't know who remembers here when flash loans first came out. Yeah, a couple of you. So it was a very fun period of like 6 months where every week something would get hacked with flash loans. And I think inevitably what flash loans brought, maybe even more important than the flash loan as a primitive, that is used by for rebalancing and a bunch of other stuff, is basically the resiliency of protocols to now know. Because before, from a game theoretical perspective, you would say, well, nobody has $1 billion. So nobody can do this. With flash loans, suddenly everyone can have $1 billion for 14 seconds between two blocks. So I think that's one piece of resiliency. Of course, the stuff that I touched upon, making more robust protocols. I think what the Foundry team did with fuzzing inevitably increased the resiliency on the smart contract level for a lot of protocols. I know, for example, Spark Capital. I know Phoenix Labs, Sablier, and a bunch of these. I think are very good protocols that didn't get hacked yet and didn't have company-ending bugs only because these tools exist.
Thank you for sharing on that. Maybe a bit of a different direction. I know Tenderly has been around for quite a few years now. So maybe if you could share with us what you've seen in terms of differences in when it comes to protocols structuring their development workflows now versus like a few years ago.
Yeah, some things are unfortunately still the same. Some things have changed. So when we started 7 years ago, it's very weird that we extracted the first stack trace for Solidity. So for non-devs in the room, stack trace is when a transaction fails, telling you which line of code caused the issue. Before that, the normal thing would be to deploy to, it was Rinkebai and maybe Kovan. Back then in Ropsten, yeah. And basically you would deploy there and then you would delete lines of code and redeploy constantly until the transaction would pass. You would do this in Remix. I think we got a long way through. I think the stuff that changed in development approach, especially for DeFi protocols, is people started doing formal verification. That's one. Second thing is testing became the main thing. I think Web3 is much more test-driven than Web2. Inevitably, because with a single line of code, you can move millions of dollars. That changed a lot. OPSEC changed a lot as well. Unfortunately, we're still using a lot of multi-sigs for a lot of stuff, but I think that's inevitable and that will still stay true for a very long time. How you collaborate changed a lot as well, because before I think Web3 development was much more single player. Now it's becoming more and more multiplayer. So what I mean by this is not you in isolation deploying a smart contract. It's now these teams that have complex interactions with them. I think the Maker ecosystem is a very good example through the Maker endgame that is happening. Of now it's not only Maker, it's like 6 DAOs and not even sub DAOs, but like 6 different teams working toward a single goal. I think we see those very decentralized organization, because a lot of DAOs aren't actually very highly decentralized organizations. How do they collaborate? I think that changed a lot as well, and I think it's now possible with all of the infrastructure, both on normal testnets but the virtual testnets as well that we shipped. Yeah, those things come to mind. I think it's mostly about testing. I don't think other stuff changed as much.
How would you say the developer tooling needs to evolve in order to support this composability that you're mentioning, these teams that have like different dependencies and interactions?
I think we made a mistake. This will sound like a different answer, but trust me, it's going somewhere. I think we made a huge mistake of trying to build Tenderly to be everything for everyone. What I mean by this is that a bunch of our tooling assumes that you're writing a smart contract and that you're debugging a smart contract. But I think if we would have assumed, which we're doing now, but if we would have assumed that you're writing a DeFi protocol, we could have made an even better tool. What do I mean by this? When you say composability, suddenly it's not only token transfers. We might actually expose the flash loan that I mentioned, or we might expose that Chronicle did an update 2 blocks before. So that's maybe an interesting thing, and that affected your transaction. So it's completely different when we look at how can tooling evolve if we assume that the only thing that found product market fit on chain is DeFi, which I would argue is true. So concrete examples is more multiplayer testing that needs to, how developer tooling needs to evolve. Easier way or cheaper way for new protocols to mathematically model these markets. Yeah, I guess it's all, again, going to be a bunch of testing stuff. I don't think Solidity or Viper or whatever is preventing us from writing cool stuff. I think it's just us feeling sufficiently safer that we can iterate faster.
Since you mentioned that you built a lot of tooling for different use cases, maybe are there any upcoming tooling features or trends that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think the EAP, that was the previous panel, but EAP 7702, so the Pectra upgrade for smart accounts, I think that will bring a lot of capabilities, and I do find it interesting how tooling and how we will show those transactions. A bunch of interesting stuff coming to virtual testnets, which is our testing product, I think will be interesting. And then we are starting to make a push into the security vertical as well. Unintentionally, but it started happening. So now we're very much intentionally pushing hard over there, but trying to figure out how do we help roll-up teams and DeFi teams stay more secure, or protect their protocols more securely, but not just doing another Web3 firewall, but being a bit more creative about that.
Adapting to the ecosystem's needs, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Tenderly, I said the same thing 45 minutes ago, but Tenderly, anything that so the only thing that's true is that every time we build something in isolation, it failed. So I have to be honest with ourselves that we're good with being people's best friends and listening to what our best friends want. So yeah, listening to what Curve, what other companies like Yearn or Maker or others basically tell us they need, or maybe what hurts, and then us realizing what these symptoms actually are pointing to and shipping that.
I would love to continue this conversation on tooling because I think it's such a key piece for our ecosystem. But unfortunately, we're at the end of this fireside chat. So let's give it a round of applause to Bogdan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.